Have you ever purchased what you thought was the perfect paint color and then got it home into your space and it looked nothing like you thought it would on your walls? So maybe then you asked your best friend or the person at the paint counter or even crowdsourced a new paint color only to find that that color didn't look the way you thought it would either. Why is that? Today, we are going to talk about 3 paint color selection myths, and I will offer 3 little known paint color suggestions about how to get your paint color right the first time with less stress and more confidence. My name is Susan Grant, owner of Color Envy Design. I am an interior decorator, 3D virtual visualization render artist, and interior paint color specialist. So let's talk about the 3 biggest misconceptions about paint color selection. The first one is the biggest one that I see over and over again, and it's the word undertone. This is the most confusing and complicated topic about paint color selection that I see when clients come to me very frustrated about why can't they get their color just right. Undertones are not fact, and that's where people get so confused. So when someone online or your best friend or someone at the paint store says, this color has this undertone, or this color does not have an undertone, and then when you get it to your space, it doesn't behave that way, that's the problem because undertones are not facts. So what is an undertone? An undertone is any way that we describe any given color that we see in any given context and light source. Because this is the biggest thing I want you to take away from this is that when you change the light source and context, you change the perceived color. So no paint color is going to behave the same way from space to space to space. Check out this amazing visual example I've created of why the undertone theory just doesn't hold water. Check this out.
This is a very powerful visual example of how light and context affects the way we perceive paint color. I specifically used Revere Pewter because most people know this paint color, and I specifically wrote the words Revere Pewter on it because no one would actually believe that this is the same sample over and over again, just in different light and context. Undertones are not facts, and paint will not behave the same way from space to space.
Paint color selection misconception number 2 is north-facing rooms and south-facing rooms. Of course, light affects color. We just spoke about that. Change the light and context, and you change the perceived color because light is the boss of color. However, just because a room is south-facing or north-facing or east-facing or west-facing does not predict the way we're going to perceive the color. So just because it's southern-facing doesn't mean it's going to appear warmer, and just because the room is northern-facing doesn't mean it's going to appear cooler. There are too many variables in these scenarios to just make a blanket statement like that. If you live in a 3-story house and you've got a second story and a first story and a basement, and they all have different windows, but they all face south, that doesn't mean that the same paint color is going to behave the same way in each of those floors just because the house is facing a certain way. So let's talk about paint color misconception 3, which is the way that you hold your samples when you are making your final selections. So many people, and I see this all the time, they see it on the internet and they see it with these beautiful flat lay photographs that designers make. They put all their samples on a tray and then they kind of look at everything like that and they say, oh, isn't this beautiful and such harmony together? That's not the best way to make your final selections in real life because of something called geometric metamerism. Now, we just spoke about not putting a ton of stock in which direction your room is facing, whether it be south or west or north or east. However, the direction you hold your samples does make a difference. So when you're sampling your paint, it should be in your space in the direction it's going to live. So take your paint sample and hold it this way. And if you're comparing it to an area rug or a tile of some sort that's going to be horizontal, you'll hold it that way, all right? That's the way that you want to see how the colors relate to each other in the direction that they'll be facing because of geometric metamerism. The way the light hits the sample affects the way we perceive the sample, which affects the way that we perceive the relationship that the 2 samples have to each other. Let's talk about some of the best practices that I use when I work with clients to help them get their paint colors just right. And these are things that you can do as well. The first one is never choose your paint color in the paint store or at your friend's house or based on what it looks like online. Always bring all your samples into your space when making your final selections. Always. It's not going to look the same from space to space to space, as we just discussed. Paint color selection tip number 2, and this is a big one, and I very rarely see this discussed on the internet. Have your final bulbs installed before you make your final selections on any of your samples, be it paint, tile, cabinetry, backsplash, flooring, whatever. Have those final bulbs installed. If you're choosing all your selections based on old bulbs and you're having construction and they're putting new bulbs in, everything's going to look different because when you change the light and context, you change the color. So that's a huge one. And the other thing is Be certain to check your samples at night under the artificial light, as well as the artificial light during the day if it's a dark space, and see if you can live with those samples for several days if time permits. You'd like to go through a whole cycle of weather, daytime, nighttime, and be certain that the color looks good in all the right places at all different times of day. So be sure you have your final bulbs in and check them at all times of day and night and in all types of weather. Paint color selection tip number 3, and this is a big one, and I very rarely see it discussed on the internet anywhere. When you are sampling your paint colors, be certain to hold them high and low, especially if you're picking paint color for cabinetry. Very often based on the window direction, not necessarily the direction the room is facing, but how the light is coming in and where the light is hitting the wall in certain places, it's going to affect the way that the paint is perceived. It can look like a totally different color up here than it looks down here. And if you're doing cabinetry, you certainly don't want your upper cabinets to look like a completely different paint color than your lower cabinets. So make sure your paint color samples look good in all the places you want them to look good in, all your target areas. When you first walk in, around the kitchen table, if you've got high ceilings, maybe you don't care so much about how it looks up there, but you want to make certain that you hold those samples, not just at eye level in one spot, but all over. Dance those samples all around your space. So how about you? What did you think about all those paint color misconceptions? Are those things that you believed? Was all this new information for you? And how about the paint color selection best practices? Are these things you think you'll implement in an upcoming project? Please reach out and leave your feedback. I would love to hear from you. Here's my information right here. You can certainly reach out there. And if you're interested in how we can work together, whether it be for 3D virtual visualization decorating services or paint color selection. And yes, we can do paint color selection remotely because I use paint color facts and data. Please reach out and schedule a complimentary discovery chat where you can tell me all about your project. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for being here. And as always, wishing you and your family a warm, wonderful, colorful day. Take care.